It's tournament time, and I have 4 matchups you need to watch in the opening round of the SWAC and MEAC tournament. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We close out today's episode with a look at the 7 HBCUs who made the D2 NCAA tournament, but we kick it off with some conference tournament talk, both in the MEAC and the SWAC, with the games that you need to watch in the opening round. Both tournaments start today, right? But luckily for you, all the games that I'm previewing are going to happen on Thursday. So you have all day today to watch this episode. Don't feel like you watched it too late and you're behind. None of that. Every game that I looked at is going to be a Thursday game, and let's kick it off with the home conference, and that is the Southwestern Athletic Conference, aka the SWAC. And Grambling versus Alabama State was an interesting matchup. There was some intrigue there, but it didn't crack my top 2. The intrigue comes from the fact that Alabama State did just pull off a big-time upset over the Tigers. But I don't have the confidence that they can do it again, so I'm not overly interested, right? Upset alert, I'll say that. Grambling versus Alabama State is an upset alert, but it's not one of the most interesting matchups. That one right there does happen today. I think it's in the evening. I think it's Wednesday evening. That's not the highlight to me. The highlight in the SWAC is 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5, because the SWAC has been all about congestion pretty much all year, and there's no reason to switch up that narrative or switch up that consistency now that we're going into the tournament. Congestion is kind of the word, and it's been that way over the last 2-3 years where you've had a log jam. I think it was either last year or the year prior that I used log jam as a way to describe the SWAC. This time I'm going to say congestion. And as the time went on, as we got closer to the finale, it became clear who was fighting for what seeds. But seeding aside, there was lack of separation throughout the majority of this playoff picture. We're only looking at 3 through 6, but if you look at 2 through 6, only 2 games separate them. If you narrow it down to our region we're looking at today, 3 through 6 only had 1 game in between. This was a very, very, very close conference. And I think that the seeding and the way we discuss these teams are representations of that, because none of this will be an upset. We'll kick it off with 3 versus 6, which is Texas Southern versus Jackson State. Then we'll go to 4 versus 5, which is Southern versus Bethune Cookman. But Texas Southern is 3, Jackson State is 6. Under most scenarios, I might argue that that's an upset. 3 over 6, or 6 over 3, I should say. I might say that that's an upset, but not here. These are evenly matched teams. Remember, 1 game separates both of these. 2 and 3, or 3 and 4, have 12 and 6 as their record. 5 and 6 have 11 and 7. That's the difference. Very minor, very minor. Texas Southern and Jackson State have played twice. They split this matchup. The first time Jackson State came out victorious by 9 points, I believe. No, I think it was 10 points. No, yes, it was 9 points, because Texas Southern would have had the tiebreaker. Jackson State won by 9 points in a game where they had a solid lead. TSU began to make a comeback, and then Jackson State rallied. That was how the first game went. I would say JSU had a decent control on the game before a late push by Texas Southern, and then their ability to answer is the reason they came out with this game. Then the next time they faced off, Texas Southern won by 10. The only reason I remember that is because of tiebreaker scenarios if it came to that. But TSU won by 10 points. And this was a game where it was close pretty much all the way through. From start to finish, this was a really close game, and it was one that TSU separated at the end, and they began to put some things together. But this is a competitive matchup both times, and I can't wait to watch it. And when we're looking at just how these teams look right now, take out the full view and just look at more recently, let's say the last 5, 6, 7 games, whatever. Jackson State has won 3 games in a row. Texas Southern has won 5 out of their last 6. And Texas Southern is the last team to beat Jackson State in the regular season. These are really quality matchups. These are really quality teams that are going against each other. Now you pivot over to Southern University versus Bethune Cookman. This is another really close one. And when I speak about the congestion that is the SWAC, when I speak about the standings, Southern's fall, and I think it's safe to call it a fall, Southern's fall is a great representation of how tough the top of the SWAC is. Because for a long time, it felt as if Southern was going to be the 1 or the 2 seed. It seemed as if Grambling and Southern were destined to just continuously fight, and we would see who would break first. And we did. We watched Southern and Grambling go at it for the number 1 seed until Southern was the first one to break. And the problem is when they broke, they didn't just break against Grambling. They continued to fall on a 3-game skid. And they've lost 4 of the last 5, 4 of the last 6 games that they've played. This is not a hot team going into the tournament. We'll see if they're able to regain their magic, but this is not the squad that we're looking at. Oh, yeah, they might be number 1. I discussed Southern a lot on this show. Southern was a heavy topic on here for their men's basketball team. And a lot of times I had to make sure to add in Grambling, because Grambling I wasn't discussing, but I made sure to say that Grambling was right there with them. At the end of the season, it's going to seem like I should have been saying Grambling. Oh, yeah, and Southern is right there with them. But I use myself not to poke holes in my coverage or anything, but to speak about how things looked at that time. That's how well that Southern was performing to start off the season. Then things change, right? You've lost to Bethune Cookman, if you're a Jaguar fan, twice. You're on a skid right now. If I were on a skid, I wouldn't want to face a team that swept me this year. That's just not what I would want to do. This is not the best matchup for somebody who is trying to find themselves, get their legs from underneath them. Like whatever cliche you want to use for being down and trying to get back up, they're trying to beat the 10 count, and they're at 8. Bethune Cookman, a team that's beat you twice, is the type of team that could get you to 9, 10, and then that's the end of it. So those are the questions that we need to know for Southern as we get into the end of the season. Is the regular season troubles going to follow them over into the postseason? We will see. Jackson State versus Texas Southern, neither one of those winning would surprise me. Southern versus Bethune Cookman, neither one of these winning would surprise me. I have my idea of what I think a quote-unquote picture-perfect quarterfinals or semifinals looks like. I have my idea of it. I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to give it to you until we get to the semis. Then I think I'll do it. Matter of fact, let's just go ahead and pivot over to the MEAC, because they have their quarterfinals, and there's some big-time matchups to watch out for and some parallels to what I said about the SWAC as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and eBay Motors is the best place to go if you want to fix up your car, you want to hook up your car, anything in between, right? I know guys who their car messed up, they need to fix a couple of things. I said, look, go to eBay Motors. You're going to get the best price and quality match. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm all about. I don't like spending a lot of money. Nobody does. But if I can spend a little bit less and still get the top tier quality, That's where I'm going. And that's why I like eBay Motors. So you go ahead and go to ebaymotors.com and you go ahead and you'll put your car into the My Garage section. Maybe you have a 2007 Dodge Challenger. You put that Challenger into the My Garage section and they'll give you a bunch of different parts that fit your car. There's over 120 million parts on eBay Motors. So they're going to have something that fits your car. All you have to do is go to ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. The whole thing, Locked On Sports Today. Go there, subscribe right now because it is the only and the first of its kind live 24/7 sports network on YouTube. Now, the MEAC, we've looked at the SWAC tournament. Let's look at the MEAC tournament. Once again, these games are going to be on Thursday. There's some parallels between what I'm looking at in the SWAC and the MEAC. And, both of them come from 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. Both are men tournament or men's games. And for me, when you look at 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, especially in an 8-team tournament, that's where you start seeing the even matchups. 1 versus 8, upset alert. 2 versus 7, upset alert. But then you go to 3, 4, 5, 6, like that's when things really start to come in and get a little bit more congested, right? I don't know if we start saying upset. Some 3 versus 6 is an upset sometimes, but that's how I'm looking at it. That's what I'm grading. So in the MEAC is a little bit different because it's the entire conference. So yeah, that 8 team is probably worse than the 8th team in the SWAC, but still the principle continues. 4 versus 5 and 3 versus 6 is a little bit closer. And I never consider 4 versus 5 an upset. Like that's a poor choice for me because you're just 1 seed apart. But 4 versus 5 is Howard versus Morgan State, and 3 versus 6 is South Carolina State versus Delaware State. And we'll start with 3 versus 6 because Delaware State is entering put up or shut up time. And I honestly don't know if it's fair to say that about Delaware State because they're the 6th seed. Like they're not 3. 3 is South Carolina State. That's put up or shut up. But for Delaware State, you're number 6. The pressure isn't truly on you, but my attention is on you because what has been the narrative around Delaware State on this show? I don't know about everywhere else, but on this show, what has been the narrative? The narrative has been all season long, how will they compete against top-level teams? When you're the 6th seed, that sounds like an unfair standard to give to you. I'll put it this way. If you are a high-level team, you will only be judged by how you perform against other high-level teams. And that may seem unfair to you. That may seem unfair to you. And I'm talking to Cowboy fans because they seem to not understand this concept. They'll say, why aren't other people held to that standard? Because they're not, we don't view them that same way. The thing about Delaware State is that they're a bit of a hybrid because they kicked off the season 3-0. When you look at how Delaware State started the season, you would have the argument that they could be a top-level team. So I looked at them and said, are they? And then for 3 games in a row, they weren't. They showed that to me. I don't know if Delaware State had a quality win through their first 10 games. I genuinely don't. Because you're looking at Morgan State, and maybe you feel like they're quality. They're here at the 5 seed, right? So maybe you consider them quality. They beat Morgan State twice. So maybe those 2 quality victories. It wasn't until Delaware State knocked off Norfolk State in the 3rd to last game. In the 3rd to last game, when they knocked off Norfolk State, was the first time this season they had an unquestionable quality victory. Nobody's saying that Norfolk State isn't a good team. Nobody's questioning it. You can't. I don't know if that translates into the tournament, but if it does, then maybe you've gained yourself some momentum. Maybe you've looked at and said, we can beat a high-level team. I don't know what kind of mental warfare or mental conversations that they're having either out loud with each other or internally with themselves, but I do know that sometimes self-doubt can come into play. Maybe that victory erased some, if not all, of that self-doubt. That's why I'm looking at them, because we're in tournament time. You're going to have to knock off South Carolina State. That's going to be a quality win if you do it. They were very close in a bunch of games. They were 1 point away from beating Norfolk State the first time. So very close. But it ain't time for being close. It's time for being victorious. So it's up to you. They've been an up and down team. Or really not. They've just been inconsistent. They've been very consistent. They beat teams that aren't that good. Morgan State has been up and down. So I don't know how you view about them, but that's how you view about them. So whatever that is how you're going to feel about Delaware State's resume. Delaware State's resume is one worthy of a 6 seed. Beat bad teams, lose against good teams. But now you have to start beating good teams, and they've shown they're capable of it. So we'll see how that goes. Then you have Morgan State versus Howard. This is one that had been a split. Howard comes in with 1 win. Morgan State comes in with 1 win. And Morgan State is interesting to me because they have wins over South Carolina State. They have wins over North Carolina Central, and they have wins over Howard. These are solid wins. These are quality victories. Remember what I was just saying about Delaware State? The ability to have quality victories. So can you get them? Morgan State has them. They've just been really up and down. That's it. They've just been up and down. They're a middle of the pack team thus far. But Howard was a step away from being a number 1 seed potentially. I don't know what the tiebreakers would have said. But you're looking at a squad who, had they beat Norfolk State, they're a 1 or a 2 seed. At worst, they are the 2nd seed. That's how close they were to being really good. Or not even close to being really good. That's how close they were to being one of the 2 top teams in the conference. They're really good, even despite not getting that. You have Morgan State, who has beaten Howard, and they're dangerous. That's what the victories mean. They're dangerous, but they've been so up and down. I can't be confident that they would beat a team like Howard. Howard is a very difficult team. They can beat them, but I'm not sure that they will. And that's the intrigue. What Morgan State do we see? And can Howard bounce back? Howard was on a 4-game winning streak before losing the last game of the season versus Norfolk State. This is going to be a very interesting MEAC tournament, so make sure that you are tuning in. All these games I looked at in the SWAC and the MEAC on Thursday, so tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to check this out. Now, one thing that happens on Friday is the Division II NCAA tournament. So now we're going national, and we have 7 HBCUs who are able to make the cut, and we'll break them down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And if you're a small business owner who is not using LinkedIn, let me know right now in the comments what you're doing. Go to Twitter at South Exclusives. Let me know why you're not using LinkedIn. And the only appropriate answer is we aren't hiring. If you have any sort of vacancy, any sort of void, any sort of interest in adding to your team, then LinkedIn is the spot to be. Because there's over 800 million people who are on LinkedIn on a daily and weekly basis. You can't tell me with that many options, you don't have the option. So go ahead. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Ain't no risk involved, no money that you need to shell out. This is a free opportunity to post your job. All you have to do is use the purple hashtag hiring frame. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free and let LinkedIn help you find the right person for your team faster and for free. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Whew. I'm ready to get it going, man. I'm ready for the SWAC and MEAC tournament. And after the opening round, right after that quarterfinals, then we will get to the NCAA tournament in the Division II aspect. One of my biggest things that I noticed off rip was Benedict made it ahead of Morehouse. And I noticed that because Morehouse was the 2nd seed in the SIAC East, while Benedict was the 3rd seed in the SIAC East. So the same division, and Morehouse actually had the better conference record. They did not have the better overall record, and they also didn't have the more critical acclaim at the beginning of the season. There was a point in which Benedict College was a top 10 team in the country. There was a point when that happened. And it was ironically right before they lost to Morehouse and Clark, but they were a top 10 team in the country at that point. So that doesn't just disappear. That favor that you had doesn't just disappear. So you're going to be valued very highly. And that's what happened here. I'm not saying that I was shocked by it, but it did catch my attention because I didn't think about it until I saw it. Once I saw it, I said, oh, yeah, they only lost one game out of conference. So obviously what they did prior to stepping into SIAC play was enough to continue to be valued, even though that they didn't get to the conference championship. They lost in the second round, same as Morehouse. So that was something that was very interesting. The biggest difference between the D1 tournament and the D2 tournament is the fact that there are 8 regions as opposed to 4. There's still 64 teams in every single tournament, D1 and D2. But on Division I, you're used to seeing 4 regions, 16 teams per. Like, that's the bracket that you're used to seeing. It's a more expansive bracket when it comes to Division II. You have 8 regions of 8 teams apiece. I don't know if I can tell you to just double. Like, if you're trying to find an equivalent, if you're a 4 seed here, are you an 8 seed? If you're a 5 seed here, are you a 10 seed? I'm not necessarily sure that that's an exact science. I would probably say you could do that to find a ballpark. You could do that to find a kind of a range on where that team would be if you want to, right? Being an 8 seed in an 8-team bracket or an 8-team region, you're not going to be the 8th seed in a 16-team region. I can tell you that right now. There's going to be a 1 seed who's going to jump you, a 3 seed who's going to jump you. Like, that's just the truth. But you might not be the bottom. You might be 15, you might be 14. So I would say if you're looking for comfort and you want to get to what you usually know and you want to say, okay, they're a 3rd seed, I would say double it and then give or take. So they're probably somewhere between a 5 and a 7. That's probably somewhere between where they are if they're a 3 seed, or they might be a 4, right? Like, it's somewhere around there. Get yourself a ballpark and a range, but don't marry yourself to that number. But let's get our conference champions out of the way right now before we get into where they rank in the NCAA tournament. Just for a refresher, in the SIAC, you had Clark men's basketball and you had Miles women's basketball. In the CIAA, you had Fayetteville State women's basketball and you had Lincoln men's basketball. And I think we covered everyone except for Miles women's basketball, right? Because we did Fayetteville State and they won to host the game. Lincoln was the first time in school history. And I know we just did Clark because that was Monday's episode where we talked about them being the champions. And I remember the route to that. Those are your 4 champions, but there are 7 HBCUs. So you got 3 teams who weren't even champions who still made it. I spilled the beans at the beginning about Benedict. Benedict College is an 8th seed, men's basketball, an 8th seed, and they join Lincoln. They're both 8th seeds, right? We're going to do all the men's basketball first, just so we're clear. Lincoln and Benedict are both 8th seeds. West Virginia State joins Lincoln in that bracket as a 7th seed. And then Clark joins that bracket with Benedict as a 6th seed. So you're looking at West Virginia State, who they aren't in the CIAA, they aren't in the SIAC. Where they reside is the Mountain East Conference. And they didn't win that conference, so they're not a champion. But they knocked off 4 teams who were ranked in the top 25 at the time of playing. That'll go a long way. If you can knock down 4 top 25 teams in a season, yeah, that's trust and believe that that's going to pay off for you later down the line, unless you're just absolute garbaggio when it comes to the rest of the season. And that's what happened for West Virginia State. It benefited them, and they were the benefactors of a tough schedule that they came up victorious in. They only lost against 1 team that was ranked in the top 25, and that was the number 2 team in the nation. Now for women's basketball, you have West Virginia State again. You have West Virginia State again, who finds themselves in the tournament, and they're the 8th seed here. Fayetteville State comes in that same region, and they're the 3rd seed, the highest ranked HBCU in the Division II tournament, period. Fayetteville women's basketball is the highest ranked HBCU of all HBCUs, male or female, in the D2 tournament. And you understand why they felt like, yeah, let's go ahead and get ourselves a home game. I should have checked to see if they got that. I didn't. That's my fault, though. I'll make sure to look that up. And then, also, they're the only one who is at the highest of their bracket, by the way. Then you also have Miles, who rounds out the trio of women's basketball teams because they come in as an 8th seed as well. So you're looking at the 4 champions: Clark men's basketball, Miles women's basketball, Fayetteville State women's basketball, and then Lincoln men's basketball. That's the 4. Then you have West Virginia State men's and women's team, and then you cap it off with 1, 2, 3. Oh, Benedict men's basketball team. I was sitting here like, what? I'm doing the math. That's supposed to be my thing. But yes, so those are your 7 HBCUs who made the Division II tournament. We have our MEAC and SWAC games to watch. We'll be back with that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do Friday's episode. I'm thinking about doing a afternoon show instead of a morning show. I'll probably have a better idea of what I'll do tomorrow. And on tomorrow's episode, we'll be looking at Tennessee State because they have a new offensive coordinator, but we'll also be looking at least one game from the opening day of MEAC and SWAC play. So until then, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.